My name is Alex Zetes. I am a Masiyiwa-Bernstein Fellow with the Global Justice Clinic at NYU School of Law. Before I was a Masiyiwa-Bernstein Fellow, I was at NYU Law School. I graduated in May of 2016. And before then, I'd been working mostly in refugee rights advocacy and in transitional justice contexts. And that's what I did before I came to law school. There were a number of reasons why I applied to the Masiyiwa-Bernstein Fellowship program. I think that it is an incredible opportunity to really build what I think are going to be the sort of next generation of leadership in human rights work. I think it's really incredible to have the opportunity to work with an innovative human rights organization right out of the gate of law school. I think that it's probably one of the best learning experiences anybody can have right after school. I'm passionate about a lot of different issues in human rights. I think my background by far is mostly in refugee work and also in transitional justice, but I've actually not worked on those issues at all this year. I've worked on a number of other very compelling issues. And I think for me, the most important thing, it's less an issue and more a theme, is about how we do human rights work. And so doing human rights work from a very solidarity standpoint and from sort of doing human rights work with a human rights methodology. And so it's more that work as opposed to a specific issue, and I think that ties into almost all the work that we do. So for the Masiyiwa-Bernstein Fellowship, I have been working with the Global Justice Clinic at the New York University School of Law for the last year, and we've been working on a ton of issues. It's been really fantastic. I've basically functioned as a combination between a staff attorney and a research fellow for the clinic, and we worked on a bunch of different issues. Some of them have been on the clinic docket, and some of them have been work that's tangential to the clinic, but it's a broad range of issues. So for example, we have a client who was a victim of the USCIA rendition program, and so we've been representing a case before the African Commission on Human and People's Rights for that. On the total opposite end of the spectrum, we've been working with an indigenous community in Guyana. They are encountering some land rights challenges, and also they're facing some extractive industry issues, and so we've been working directly with them, which has also been really exciting. And then also, in addition to that, the other big project I've worked on this year is looking at mental health and well-being in human rights workers, and that's been sort of all over the world. So those are the three big projects that I've been working on this year for my fellowship, but then sort of as happens all the time, there's 1,000 other things that have come up, and so I've worked on those as well. The most challenging thing that I have found about being a Masiyiwa-Bernstein Fellow, and I think this is true of anything that you would do the first year after you graduate, is just that there's so much to do and there's not enough time to do it. I think the fact that the fellowship is a one-year program and that the program rotates every year, I think is really great, and that it provides a variety of experiences both to potential fellows and also sort of spreads out the good that the fellowship can do by having different partnerships over time. But I think what that means is that for me, I know as soon as I got here, I was like, well, I got to get going, because I have, now 11 months and 3 weeks to do everything that I want to do. And this sense of sort of a time limit gives you a real sense of urgency, which I think in the end has been a good thing, because it's made me a faster worker and a more competent worker. But that's probably been the biggest challenge I have encountered. There have been a number of things that I've worked on that have been really rewarding for the Masiyiwa-Bernstein Fellowship. I think the thing that has been one of the most important experiences for me is, so we've been working with this indigenous community in Guyana, and I had the opportunity to go with Meg Satterswaith, who is my supervisor for this program, down to Guyana and to go work with the community there for a week, and to be able to see the work that we had done before we went down there, and to kind of figure out how to work on the ground with the work products that we had before, and to see what was useful and what wasn't useful, and to really sort of be on their turf, as it were, and to really be able to have some very honest conversations with our clients about the things that they cared about and what they were interested in. I think there's really very little that can compare to a face-to-face conversation. And so that was really, it was a very rewarding experience for me to see that go from beginning to end. Not that the partnership is over, that will continue, but to see sort of the prep work for that trip, and then us being on that trip, and sort of the things that came out of that was really rewarding for me. The most surprising thing for me about this fellowship was that I had not been intending to work in an academic setting before when I finished law school, and to be housed in the university but to be doing very practical legal work was really exciting for me. I really like the combination of sort of academic research and things that are very sort of practical in the moment. And it's been really great for me to also be not necessarily supervising students, but to be working with students, because I think that's something I would really like to do. And so I was surprised by how much I liked being in an academic institution. It's been a really great experience for me. The most memorable experience about this fellowship for me was, well, so far, right, because I've got 1 month left, but was when we went to Guyana. One of the things that we had done was prepare some really basic analytics based off of some data that they had been gathering, and they didn't have the technology to do it themselves. And what we were able to do was, for the first time, show them what their own data was showing them, and to see the impact that that had right away, and sort of the way that that was received. And for me, it was probably the most concrete example I've ever had of being able to use like my skills and my education as like a Western human rights practitioner to do something that a community that was in a more difficult situation couldn't do on their own. And I think that was really impactful for me. And I think also, this hasn't happened yet, but I'm sure this will also be important, is towards the end of my fellowship, I'm actually going to Honduras for almost a week to go attend this gathering of Central American human rights defenders to talk about mental health and well-being and how do we think about security in a very holistic sense. And that's incredible for me because we've been invited by this community to basically like share our research, but also just to listen. And I think that that's a really great thing. So I'm sure that experience will stick with me forever as well. There are a number of ways that the Masiyiwa-Bernstein Fellowship has really prepared me for, I would say, not only what comes next for me, but really for my whole human rights career. The first is that it's just given me a really good year to dig into a lot of very substantive issues and to do a lot of work that I have found both compelling and inspirational, and also has really grown me a lot. So substantively, there's been a lot of growth for me. I think also from a skills perspective, I've done a lot of writing, I've done a lot of research, I've done a lot of interviews now at this point as well. And so these are all skills that I know are very important, and I think it's important to practice them all, and I've had a lot of opportunities to do that here. So that's been really great. And I think possibly one of the most important things, not to diminish the first two, is that I've had this privilege of working with these incredible individuals for a year, and I think that in this field where our work is often very hard and it's a lot of hours and it's sometimes a little bit thankless, it's really important to have a strong team of people that both inspire you and that you know that you can like draw upon their knowledge and their guidance. And I feel like being a Masiyiwa-Bernstein Fellow has really provided me with those opportunities to meet some of those individuals and really develop those friendships. And that's true for both like my co-fellows who I had known sort of peripherally before we were fellows together, but now even though we're in different places, we still sort of have this camaraderie. And that's true for a number of other individuals that have really mattered a lot to me. The Masiyiwa-Bernstein Fellowship has really, I would say, broadened and deepened my knowledge of a number of substantive human rights. It's kind of surprising is the wrong word, but it's been very interesting for me to see. It's been sort of, I think it was Socrates that said, like the more I learn, the more I realize that I know nothing, right? And so it's been definitely one of those experiences for me where I feel like I had been studying very hard for 3 years, focusing on just these issues. And working this year, I got to really dig into the issues of like national security and human rights, which turns out I was not well versed in at all. And then also indigenous rights, which I knew I didn't know anything about and now feel like I can talk about with some knowledge. And I can see sort of where there are places for people like me to add to that conversation. And so there's been a lot of growth, but I think substantively those are the two areas where I have probably learned the most substantively. I think for the question of what we should be focusing on as a human rights community now based on sort of where we are in the world, I think I've heard this question a lot, and I think actually the answer is not so much which issue, I think it's how we're working. And for me, I think the most important thing is that our work needs to be driven by the people who the work is for. And I think that for a long time, our field, and not just our field, there's a number of them, but we've been pretty guilty of this, is sort of been deciding, well, we have the answers for you, and let's see this project, and let's do this thing. And there's value in that, but there's so much more value in going to the places where assistance is needed and asking questions like, what would you like for us to do? How would you like for this to happen? And I think that that solidarity approach and that legal empowerment approach is something that we're seeing more and more, and I think that's really great. But I think that, especially given the fact that technology makes communication much easier and it makes things much more feasible, I think it's really imperative that we focus a lot more on the how we've been doing our work. And then the what will follow, right? Because you go and you ask someone in a community, well, what do we need to do? And they're going to know more than we would know what that community needs, right? So I think the what will sort of follow that by nature. But I think the big question is sort of the how and sort of what our role is, and to be a little bit more confident but humble, right? And sort of in our role in this field. Two pieces of advice that I would give to future Masiyiwa-Bernstein Fellows. The first is that a year sounds like a long time. It is not a long time, so be ready to hit the ground running. I think there's a lot that you can do with this fellowship, but you have to be ready to run. And then the second thing that I would really suggest is to be proactive. I think often with programs where they're sort of not quite, the word I want to use is one-off, but that's not the right word. But when there are these programs that rotate the way that the Bernstein Fellowship, the Masiyiwa-Bernstein Fellowship program does, oftentimes it takes a little bit longer to sort of find your spot or to figure out exactly what you're going to be working on or where you're most useful. And I think that part of that means it's sort of incumbent upon you to really reach for it and to push for it. And so I think I would really encourage them to be proactive and really kind of reach out for the things that they want. Because I think if you do that, I think this fellowship can be absolutely incredible.